We hear about billionaires literally every single day, right? But today, we're going to measure them against the true titans of history. And we're kicking things off with a modern metric that is, well, frankly, it's just insane.
30 million. Yep, that's exactly how many years you'd have to work on an average salary just to match Elon Musk's current fortune of $500 billion. To put that into perspective for you, 30 million years ago is literally halfway between us and the last T-Rex.
Okay, let's really get into this. Right now, at this very moment, every single second that ticks by, Elon Musk earns about $3,000. I mean, in the time it takes you just to watch the first half of this explainer, he'll have raked in another $1 million. That's enough to buy your dream house, a nice car, and still have some pocket change. Thanks to companies like Tesla and SpaceX, he's the first person ever to hit a net worth of $500 billion. But it begs the question, right? Even though he's currently the richest person in absolute numbers, is he truly the wealthiest human to ever exist?
Well, to answer that, we're jumping into Section 1, the modern benchmark versus the cash king. We're going to kick off our historical investigation by comparing today's digital, tech-based billions to the purest, most physical form of wealth you can possibly imagine. The contrast here is absolutely staggering. See, Musk's wealth isn't just sitting around in some giant Scrooge McDuck vault. It's tied up in the estimated value of his companies, constantly rising and falling with the stock market. But then you have Pablo Escobar, the undisputed king of logistics, who turned an illegal product into a brutally efficient empire. His personal fortune peaked at an estimated $30 billion adjusted for inflation. Now, sure, that's a fraction of Musk's wealth, but Escobar's money didn't depend on volatile tech stocks. It was pure physical cash. But here's the crazy part. Having that much physical cash actually turned into a massive liability. Escobar is widely considered the person who hoarded the most cash in human history, and man, it came with some wild hidden costs. He was literally spending over $1,000 a week just on rubber bands to bundle the bills together. Even crazier, he lost close to $2 billion a year simply because the money rotted away in the humidity or got eaten by rats. There's even a story that while he was on the run, he burned $2 million in cold, hard cash just to light a fire and keep his family warm. Unbelievable, right?
All right, moving on to Section 2, Cash, Oil, and Industry. Here we step into the 20th century, an era where titans didn't just hoard cash, they engineered the economic gears of entire nations.
When the United States was a pretty young nation and oil was just starting to power the world, John D. Rockefeller built Standard Oil into an absolute behemoth. He controlled a staggering 90% of the country's refined oil. 90%. The company grew so massive that the government actually stepped in and forced his monopoly to break up into 34 different companies you definitely know today, like Exxon and Chevron. But here is the ultimate irony of the whole thing. That breakup, which was totally meant to curb his power, actually made him richer. He kept shares in all the new companies, and they all just skyrocketed on the stock market. So, the really crucial point here is context. When we measure wealth against the total economy of the time, Rockefeller actually pulls ahead. By 1913, his net worth topped $900 million. In today's money, Guinness World Records estimates his inflation-adjusted fortune at a mind-bending $631 billion. That was equal to 2% of the entire U.S. GDP. That completely overpowers Elon Musk's current fortune, which represents about 1.6% of the U.S. GDP today.
And you know, Rockefeller didn't just get rich by accident. He basically transformed chaotic, unpredictable capitalism into a cold, hard science using a pretty brilliant three-step blueprint. First, he standardized processes, figuring out early on that consistency equals profitability. Second, he controlled the entire supply chain. This let him drive prices straight to the bottom, completely crush his competitors, and then just hike the prices back up once they were gone. And third, he laid the foundations for modern corporate power, proving that a company could be an autonomous machine that easily outlives its visionary founder.
Right around that very same time, Henry Ford was amassing his own massive fortune, equal to about 1.3% of the US GDP, which is just shy of Musk's percentage today. But Ford's true wealth, that was his influence on daily life. He didn't invent the car, but he completely reinvented how to mass produce it. By introducing the assembly line, doubling his workers' wages, and cutting the workday down to 8 hours, he slashed the time it took to build a Model T from 12 hours to just 90 minutes. The price plummeted from $950 to $290. Ford literally engineered the modern middle class, making it so the very workers building his cars could actually afford to buy them. And this next part brilliantly illustrates the whole mindset shift of that era. Take Andrew Carnegie, the guy who essentially built America's skyscrapers and railroads. He amassed wealth equal to 1% of the GDP. But when he sold Carnegie Steel, he didn't just sit on his mountains of money. He established 2,500 public libraries and funded entire universities. He famously believed that a man who dies rich dies in disgrace. He totally flipped the script, turning philanthropy from a mere symbolic gesture into a professional mission, like a true moral duty for capitalists.
All right, let's take a bigger step back in time. Welcome to Section 3, Bankers Who Financed Empires. Here, wealth transitions away from the industrial monopolies of self-made men and over to the sprawling empires of royal families and secretive bankers who financed entire global wars.
This timeline really paints a picture of our chronological descent. We're moving way past modern industry, trekking through the era of global bankers, and diving straight into the absolute power of ancient rulers. Let's zoom in on the first two names on this list.
First up, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. This guy ruled a sixth of the planet. Land, mines, banks, and the lives of 150 million people legally belonged to him personally. That gave him an estimated fortune of $300 billion before the Bolshevik Revolution, while ultimately cost him his life. But going back a century before him, the Rothschild family grasped something way more revolutionary. They realized financial trust actually travels faster than gold. They sent 5 sons across Europe to build the first synchronized multinational bank. While armies were taking months just to communicate, the Rothschilds were using private couriers, encrypted codes, and literally carrier pigeons to coordinate money transfers in days. By financing wars and entire nations, this single family amassed an estimated $300 to $600 billion.
Okay, going back even further to the 1500s, we meet a guy named Jakob Fugger. He amassed 2% of the entire European economy. That's roughly $400 billion today. He lent money to kings and popes on a massive, unprecedented scale. Get this, he actually lent the Vatican the cash to build the Sistine Chapel. To pay him back, the Pope authorized the sale of indulgences, basically divine forgiveness for cash. That move outraged a monk named Martin Luther and inadvertently sparked the entire Protestant Reformation. Oh, and Fugger also left behind a walled neighborhood in Augsburg for needy families. 5 centuries later, the rent there is still exactly the same, 88 cents a year, provided you pray 3 times a day. How wild is that?
And now, we reach the true climax of historical wealth in Section 4, Rulers of the Ancient World. We're about to encounter ancient leaders whose personal fortunes literally broke economies and defined absolute global control. Picture this, it's 1324, and Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali Empire, controls mines that produce almost half of the world's gold. When he decided to take a pilgrimage to Mecca, he definitely did not travel light. We're talking 60,000 people and 80 camels, each hauling 140 kilos of gold. As he traveled, he gave away so much gold in every single city he passed through that he completely flooded the markets. He plummeted the value of gold and single-handedly crashed regional economies for 12 straight years. His immense power and fortune translate to roughly $400 to $500 billion today. But if we're looking proportionally at the world stage, Caesar Augustus easily takes the crown. After defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Augustus became Rome's first emperor, and he decided to just keep Egypt as his own personal property. He personally controlled a fifth of the Roman Empire's entire wealth. That equates to roughly 5% of the global GDP, all in the hands of a single man. If you try to extrapolate that into today's numbers, it's an absolutely unimaginable $5 trillion in absolute economic control.
And if we dig into the oldest texts we have, the biblical King Solomon supposedly received 666 talents of gold every single year. For the record, that's about 22 tons of gold. Combine that with tribute and trade, and his mythical net worth gets pushed to a staggering $1 to $2 trillion. Now sure, there's probably more myth than fact going on here, but one thing is for certain, no king of antiquity concentrated as much legendary wealth as Solomon.
So, after exploring all these completely mind-bending statistics across the breadth of human history, we finally arrive at Section 5, the relativity of wealth. Drumroll, please. Who actually wins the title of the richest person ever?
Well, looking at this final breakdown, the answer really depends entirely on your metric. If you're looking at modern, absolute numbers, Elon Musk is the clear winner for sure. If you're talking about pure, physical cash on hand, Pablo Escobar easily takes the throne. If you want to measure by the percentage of a nation's GDP, John D. Rockefeller dominates his era like no one else. And if we're talking about absolute power and total global economic control, Caesar Augustus holds the ultimate historical record.
But here's the really crucial point I want you to take away from this explainer. Absolute wealth is kind of an illusion. Wealth is entirely relative to its historical context. I mean, yes, Mansa Musa had endless mountains of gold, but he lived in a world without basic electricity, antibiotics, or vaccines. King Solomon built majestic temples of gold, but he had zero access to modern machinery. He didn't even have the mathematical concept of the number zero. On the flip side, today's billionaires enjoy all this incredible technology, but their vast fortunes rely so heavily on the fragile, volatile trust of the stock market.
Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. Considering the incredible conveniences, the medical marvels, and the literal supercomputer you probably hold in your hands right this very second, would you really trade your modern average life to be the wealthiest ruler of antiquity? Wealth isn't everything, especially when the poorest among us today have access to everyday miracles that all the gold in Rome couldn't buy. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through history, and as always, keep questioning the numbers.